The following cases illustrate how advances in DNA technology, combined with persistent investigative techniques, can help solve cold cases even decades later. They also highlight the importance of keeping evidence well preserved, as future technologies may provide new clues for seemingly unsolvable cases. In this video, we bring you 10 cases that had been archived and were solved decades later. Adam Walsh. Adam Walsh, 6 years old, disappeared from a shopping center in Florida on July 27, 1981. 2 weeks later, his head was found in a canal. The case gained national attention and led his father, John Walsh, to become a victims' rights advocate and host of the America's Most Wanted program. The case remained unsolved for 27 years. In 2008, the Hollywood, Florida police concluded that Otis Toole, a deceased serial killer, was responsible for Adam's murder. Toole had confessed to the crime years earlier and later recanted, and the police didn't have enough evidence at the time to charge him. The resolution of the case was based on a complete review of the evidence, including a detailed confession from Toole that matched physical evidence not publicly disclosed. Although Toole was already dead, he died in prison in 1996. The police considered the case solved. Nova Welsh. Nova Welsh, 24 years old, was found strangled in her apartment in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in 1981. The case went unsolved for almost 4 decades. In 2020, nearly 39 years after the crime, Darrell Rear, 64, was convicted of Welsh's murder. The resolution of the case was made possible thanks to advances in DNA technology and the persistence of investigators. Rear's DNA was found under Welsh's fingernails, but at the time of the crime, the technology wasn't advanced enough to use this evidence. Years later, with the development of more sophisticated DNA analysis techniques, investigators were able to make the connection between Rear and the crime. Killer clown Marlene Warren. This case became known as the Killer Clown case due to the bizarre circumstances of the crime. On May 26, 1990, in Wellington, Florida, Marlene Warren was shot to death by someone dressed as a clown who rang her doorbell and delivered flowers and balloons before shooting. The case remained unsolved for 27 years, until 2017, when Sheila Keene Warren was arrested and charged with the murder. Sheila had married Michael Warren, Marlene's husband, in 2002. The resolution of the case was made possible thanks to a new analysis of the evidence, including DNA and witnesses who hadn't been interviewed before. Investigators discovered that Sheila and Michael were having an affair at the time of the murder, and that Sheila had purchased a clown costume days before the crime. In 2023, Sheila Keene Warren pleaded guilty to second-degree murder as part of a plea deal, finally closing this bizarre and long-standing case. These cases demonstrate how the persistence of investigators, combined with technological advances and new analyses of old evidence, can lead to the resolution of archived cases even decades after the crimes occurred. Karen Klass, 32, was the ex-wife of singer Bill Medley of the Righteous Brothers duo. On January 30, 1976, she was attacked upon returning home after dropping her son off at school in Hermosa Beach, California. She was found unconscious, raped, and strangled. She died a few days later in the hospital. The case remained unsolved for decades, despite extensive investigations. In 2017, it was finally solved using a technique called familial DNA searching. This technique compares DNA found at the crime scene with DNA databases of convicted criminals, looking for partial matches that could indicate a relative of the suspect. A partial match led investigators to Kenneth Troyer, who had been killed by police in 1982. Additional DNA tests confirmed that Troyer was Klass's killer. Colette Aram. Colette Aram disappeared on October 30, 1983, in Keyworth, Nottinghamshire, England, while walking to her boyfriend's house. Her body was found the next day in a nearby field, The case remained unsolved until 2009. That year, the police conducted a mass DNA sweep in the area, collecting samples from thousands of men. A man named Paul Hutchinson was arrested after his son provided a DNA sample that partially matched the DNA found at the crime scene. Hutchinson, who was 51 at the time of his arrest, confessed to the crime and was sentenced to life in prison. He died in prison in 2010, Jane Doe in Pima County, Brenda Gero. On April 8, 1981, the body of an unidentified woman was found near Tucson, Arizona. For decades, she was known only as Pima County Jane Doe. In 2023, the case had a significant breakthrough thanks to forensic genetic genealogy. This technique uses DNA to build family trees and identify distant relatives, who can then lead to the identification of the person. The victim was identified as Brenda Gero, who was 20 years old when she disappeared from her home in New Hampshire, 1980. Although the identification of the victim was a major breakthrough, the killer has not yet been identified. However, authorities have a suspect, John Kalhauser, a former boyfriend of Gero, who is serving a life sentence for the murder of his wife in 1995. Joseph Henry Loveless. This is a notable case due to its age. In 1979, human remains were found in a cave in Idaho, USA. The body was dismembered and wrapped in burlap sacks. The case remained unsolved for decades, with the victim's identity unknown. In 2019, thanks to advances in forensic genetic genealogy, the remains were finally identified as belonging to Joseph Henry Loveless, a known fugitive and criminal who disappeared in 1916 at the age of 46. Loveless was known for escaping from prison several times and was being sought for the murder of his wife when he disappeared. The identification was made by comparing DNA with living descendants of Loveless. Although Loveless's killer has never been identified, the resolution of his identity, the more than 100 years, is considered a major breakthrough forensic science. Kristol Beslanowicz. Kristol Beslanowicz, 17, was found dead on the banks of the Provo River in Utah, USA, in December 1995. She had been beaten to death with a rock. The case remained unsolved for 18 years, until 2013. The resolution came through an innovative DNA collection technique called touch DNA. Investigators were able to extract DNA from the rock to kill Beslanowicz. Even after so many years, the DNA led to Joseph Michael Simpson, who was arrested and subsequently convicted of the murder. Simpson had been considered a suspect at the time of the crime, but there wasn't enough evidence to charge him until the technological advancement allowed for the analysis of DNA on the rock. The Peterson-Schuessler murders. This case, also known as the Chicago Boys murders, occurred in October 1955. 3 boys are Robert Peterson, 14, and John and Anton Schuessler, 13 and 11 respectively, were found dead in a forest on the outskirts of Chicago. The case remained unsolved for almost half a century. In 1994, new evidence emerged linking Kenneth Hansen to the crime. Hansen was finally convicted in 1995, 40 years after the murders. The resolution came after a renewed investigation and testimonies from people who claimed Hansen had confessed to the crime years earlier. Although there was no DNA evidence in this case, the persistence of investigators and new witnesses were crucial in solving this old case. Lloyd Dwayne Bogle and Patricia Kalitsky. This double homicide case occurred in January 1956 in Great Falls, Montana, USA. Lloyd Dwayne Bogle, 18, and his girlfriend Patricia Kalitsky, 16, were found shot to death. The case remained unsolved for 65 years, until 2021. The resolution came through the use of forensic genetic genealogy, the same technique used to identify the Golden State Killer. DNA collected from the crime scene was compared to genealogical databases, leading investigators to Kenneth Gould as the suspect. Unfortunately, Gould had died in 2007, but additional DNA tests on his relatives confirmed that he was the killer. These cases demonstrate how technological advances, especially in DNA analysis and genetic genealogy, combined with persistent investigation, can help solve crimes decades after they were committed. They also highlight the importance of preserving evidence, as future technologies may provide new clues for seemingly unsolvable cases. So, which of these cases did you find most curious? Comment below, and see you in the next video.